please join me in welcoming Ambassador Dr. Leiter.
I'm humbled. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Eli, thank you for the kind introduction. Miriam, Mark, David, I feel we're already mishpucha, so I'll call you by your first names without titles. Would it be okay with all of you if I kind of came closer? Yeah. So, I don't have much time with you. So, if I anger anybody with my remarks, hold it in. Get over it. It's a exchange of ideas. I'm not here every day. And you probably don't hear what I'm going to say on ABC or CBS or CNN or even Fox. So I'd appreciate your attention for a few minutes, and then we'll have questions and answers. And I insisted on visiting with you. I try to get out of Washington as much as I can. For those of you who haven't lived in Washington, you don't understand that. But for those who have, you understand why you want to get out of Washington as much as possible. I do the diplomacy all week, and I try to get out for weekends to universities, to Jewish communities, to churches on Sunday, and then get back to Washington Sunday night, Monday morning. But I do have trips during the course of the week. This is one of them. There's a huge company here in Indiana that has a large contract with Israel, and I wanted to, cement that relationship and show my appreciation for that relationship. So I said, I'm coming out to Indiana to meet with the company, and tomorrow I'll be meeting with the governor and the controller, the treasurer, and of course one of your senators. But I always want to meet with the Jewish community wherever I go. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you all for coming out and sharing some time with me. I came to Washington on January 27th. It was actually the first day. And as I landed, the prime minister called and said, I decided to come next week. I said, give me some breathing space. I just got here. But the president invited him. It was actually the first foreign leader to be invited by the Trump administration. And there's a policy that you can't actually enter the Oval Office unless you've presented your credentials. Now, usually it takes about 2 months for the ambassador to present credentials, because what they do is they invite like 10 ambassadors together, and you first present your credentials to the State Department and then to the White House. And I didn't have any time because the Prime Minister was coming the next week. So the White House called and said, look, we'll make an exception for you. You have to come in to the White House next Tuesday morning. The Prime Minister is going to meet with the President Tuesday afternoon. So if it goes south, I can't be with the meeting, and I've got to be at the meeting with the President. So my staff, very, very accomplished staff, very professional staff, I mean, the best foreign diplomats are sent to the United States. And aside from Itai here from the consulate in Chicago, the best of the best come to Washington. But he's the best of the best here in Chicago. He's your consul, in your consulate. He's fantastic. And they came in with a letter, and they said, this is the letter in order to get your credentials from the State Department. I looked at the letter. I said, this is a good letter. But you know when you can detect something is cut and paste? Like, have you been there? So it was clearly, it wasn't AI. I taught in university, so I can detect AI stuff too. But this was cut and paste. Like, they took the previous letters from my predecessors and, they put something together, and it was okay. But I said, you know what? For me, it's a historic moment. I'm a kid that grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, made Aliyah at 18, coming back here as Israel's representative to Washington. I got to write something that is, for me, a historic document. So I closed the door to the office and I said, don't bother me for a few minutes. And I thought. I said, what is the first opening sentence in my letter to get credentials as Israel's ambassador? And it didn't take me long. And I wrote, I represent a people indigenous to the land of Israel, period. And the reason I began my letter with that sentence is because when I assess everything that we're experiencing, the incessant attack on our very life as a nation that hasn't stopped for one moment, thousands of attempted terrorist attacks every day that are thwarted. What is at the core of it all? At the root is the assertion that we are colonizers, that we are not indigenous to the land, that we are occupiers. And the father of the Palestinian ideology to deny, decry, and really rip the land of Israel from the people of Israel, Professor Edward Said of Columbia University, said it very well. He said, the British have left Nigeria, the French have left Algeria, only the Jews remain in Palestine. Now think about that for a minute. Only the Jews remain in Palestine. So we are to the land of Israel what the British are to Nigeria. We are to the land of Israel what the French are to Algeria. Except, ladies and gentlemen, that's a lie. It's a big lie. It's a lie that has made its way through large tracts of the world, of the globe, of society, of the academy for sure. So you wonder sometimes, why is it? You know that reflex? You've all felt that reflex. Everything Israel does is immediately wrong, and everything the other side does is immediately good. You don't assess, really, analyze what it is that was done. You just explain away everything. Look at the way on October 8th. The slaughter of people, the beheadings of babies was celebrated on college campuses. Celebrated, not tolerated, celebrated by professors teaching your children at the most prestigious universities. Everything that we do is wrong because we're not supposed to be there in the first place. Everything they do is understandable, is excusable, because we're not supposed to be there. So anything is justified that you do against us. So what we need to do, I think, is revisit unabashedly, unequivocally, unapologetically what Zionism is. And I must say, some Jews have contributed to this misunderstanding. The misunderstanding that we are to Israel as the British are to Nigeria. That somehow Zionism was a creation of German nationalism or some sort of European nationalism of the 19th century. No, it wasn't. I'll tell you a story. It has to do with Indiana. Shocking story. It has to do with Indiana. Right? Herzl created modern Zionism in what year? 1894. Dreyfus trial. 1894, 95. Now, don't misunderstand me. Herzl is one of my biggest heroes. He's a great man. Anybody at the age of 34 that can say, I was wrong, and change his life is a big man. Because usually after the age of 14, we're not capable of saying we made a mistake. And here he is, 34, and he says, I get it all wrong. I thought that Jews can normalize their situation in the world by baptizing themselves. That's what he wrote in 1890. I thought that's what we can do. And then he sees the Dreyfus trial. And let me tell you something. If Dreyfus was a chassid, like let's say Dreyfus was he had payas and a beard, a big black yarmulke, there never would have been Herzl. The amazing thing that Herzl got was that Dreyfus was a completely assimilated Jew. You know how assimilated Dreyfus was? So going back to my youth, I always used to buy my books at Barnes & Noble bargain basement. And one fine day I'm in the bargain basement and I see out of the corner of my eye the complete diary of Captain Dreyfus. I said, this has got to be interesting. So I get the book and I sit down and I begin to read, and one page is more boring than the next. These are the letters of Dreyfus that he writes to his wife from Devil's Island. I saw Papillon, I saw scenes of Devil's Island. I thought that it would be, very interesting. He says something about Devil's Island, and every letter is woe unto me, woe unto me, woe unto me, woe unto me. And this goes on for 202 pages. And I say to myself, why am I continuing to read this? When I pinch myself, I realized I was reading it for one reason. I wanted to see if at any point in his life, 5 years in Devil's Island, Dreyfus recognized the fact that he was persecuted because he was a Jew. And lo and behold, I read for 200 pages, 5 years of letter writing, and never once does Dreyfus say, I was put out here on trumped up charges to Devil's Island because I'm a Jew. That's how integrated he was into the French system. That's how much he believed he was a Frenchman, a full-blooded Frenchman. And Herzl said, it's happening to him? No, I was wrong. The solution must be that we fulfill what Jews have been talking about now for 3,500 years. He wasn't born, he didn't go and say, well, there's German nationalism. No, he knew that Jews had been talking about something, praying for something, acting on something. He knew there had been two Jewish commonwealths that collectively lasted about 1,000 years. He knew about King Solomon. He knew that the very beginning of Judaism is the link between the land of Israel and the people of Israel, because we're introduced to Abraham with a message: get thee out of here and go to the land. That's how we're introduced to Abraham. Who dare says that Zionism is something new? The very beginning of Judaism is Zionism, the connection between the people and the land. And where was the name Philistine or Palestine? Where did it come from? Where did it begin historically? It began after the destruction of the Second Commonwealth. When under the Bar Kokhba revolt, the insurrection against Roman occupation, that was an occupation, by the way, Rome to the Jews, that was occupation, right? 132, 135, almost succeed in this insurrection, and the Romans said, gee, these Jews know how to fight. So what we're going to do is we're going to separate the people from the land, because the people in the land go so deep, they go all the way back to Abraham, it's going to be difficult to separate them. So what we're going to do is we're going to press coins in this year 136. And on the coins we're going to press Palestine, because once upon a time, who fought against the Jews? The Philistines. So we'll take Philistine and put it on the coins to separate. But the Jews, of course, were smarter than the Romans. Because you know what we did? We faced Jerusalem 3 times a day. And we finished our Seder, the Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. And when our kids got married, we left 1.5 by 1.5 unpainted over the doorpost to remember. And when they got married, they broke a glass under the chuppah to remember that it can't be complete because we're in exile. We never allowed that bond to be broken. But before Herzl, in 1891, a evangelical minister, the most popular evangelical minister in the United States, Google him when you get home, Dwight Moody, Chicago, had a student friend by the name of William Gladstone. And he went around the country, he took a document in which he called for the immediate return of the Jewish people to the Holy Land. And he went to the president. He had 300 signatures of political leaders, of journalists, of church leaders, and he went to the president. And who was the president at the time? Benjamin Harrison. Thank you so much. Forgive me. So that's the Indiana connection. So that's 1891, 3 years before Herzl, because there was an understanding, an appreciation for the connection between the people and the land. I refer to Herzl because I think that we've all been facing a Herzlian moment since October 7th. We have a choice to make. When Herzl saw Dreyfus being dragged through the streets, the very streets where they had screamed liberty, equality, and fraternity, and now they were screaming death to the Jews, it was kind of similar to, from the river to the sea, baloney, right? But it wasn't baloney, it's annihilationist, and it's an annihilationist chant. So in the same streets on the Champs-Élysées where they had screamed liberty, equality, fraternity, they were now screaming death to the Jews. There were other Jews at the time who saw that happening, but they didn't have that Herzlian moment. They didn't say, how is this going to change me? What kind of effect is it going to have on me? Herzl wasn't complacent. He wasn't willing just to sit by and say, this is interesting. This is something that we have to, be outraged about and go home and go to sleep and continue our lives. October 7th was a Dreyfusian moment or a Herzlian moment. Are we the same people? After we tried for 30 years to create the backdrop, the props on the stage, the possibility for reconciliation, for normalization, for living together. And all we got ever since we welcomed and embraced Arafat was violence and terrorism. There were those who said, don't give them guns, they're going to use them against us. And we gave them guns and they used them against us. They pay terrorists. It's called pay for slay. Pay terrorists, pay the families of terrorists who kill people. We said, if you give them the vote in Gaza, they're going to elect Hamas. Just this week, we heard the rapporteur on human rights for the UN. Thank God the administration has now sanctioned her, Francesca Albanese, who said that Hamas is a political entity. They build hospitals, they build schools. This is the rapporteur of human rights in the United Nations. They build hospitals, they build schools. Well, it's obviously, the person is not an ignoramus. It can't be ignorance. There has to be some element of malevolence here, of malfeasance. How can anybody say something so utterly immoral? And let me ask you, Mao, who murdered 60 million people, did he build schools and hospitals? Or Stalin, who murdered 30 million people? Or the Khmer Rouge? Or the Ustasi of Croatia? Hitler didn't build schools and hospitals? Question is, what is the idea? What do you represent? Open up the Hamas charter. First paragraph. Eliminate the state of Israel and kill Jews. So what does that mean? You build hospitals. So what? It means you're not a murderer? Don't allow these kinds of platitudes to become places of ideational refuge for murder. They're murderers. It is unprecedented in the annals of modern warfare for any country to confront an enemy that on an area which is 25 miles long and 8 miles wide, to have 450 miles of tunnels, the width of the state of Pennsylvania. That's not something I make a mistake about. And that is not only willing to have their own people killed, but celebrates their people who die. Because that's how you convey the message to the world. See how many they're killing, and look what the world does. It's just an amazing thing. The health ministry of Gaza, right? The health ministry of Hamas, right? Imagine saying, the health ministry of Goebbels. Hitler's health ministry issued facts and figures. What does that even mean? So the Hamas produces figures. Now what happens? The UN comes and quotes the figures without mentioning that they're Hamas figures. So those figures are adopted like the Darwin's theory of evolution. Truth, scientific. And then the media picks it up from the UN, and that's accepted like the gospel. Right? That's the gospel now. These are the numbers. In war, go study modern warfare. We don't know the enemy. You can't know how many are killed. Kind of idiocy is that? Nobody accepts what the numbers that the enemy gives out. It's ridiculous. But I know what our soldiers are instructed to do. I know the orders that we give. And I know the extent that we go in order to avoid collateral damage. And I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, no army in the world goes to the extent of preventing collateral damage as the IDF does. Not one. None. And I deal with American generals daily. I know what they say. I know what they went through in Fallujah and Mosul and other places. And I'll tell you frankly, from a very personal angle, if we did what we're being accused of doing, my son would be alive today. My son went in on foot, house to house, to find our refugees, and went into a booby-trapped tunnel, lost his life and the life of 3 of his command team, and 5 others lost their legs. Any other army in the world would strafe bomb population centers. That's what you do in war, but not Israel. And what do we get for it? We get claims of genocide. Busha v'cherpa. You know what that means in Hebrew? Busha v'cherpa. Shame on anybody. Shame on those who use that expression. And this is time for all of us to have that Herzlian moment. To realize that what happened on October 7th tore the mask off this facade. That all we have to do is give up a little here, give up a little there, divide Jerusalem, and everything will be fine. Listen closely to what all those students of Edward Said were saying on campus. Listen closely. From the river to the sea, from the river to the sea. It doesn't matter that they're all morons and couldn't find the river to the sea on a map. But we know what they're talking about. We know we're talking about from the river to the sea. We're talking about the elimination of Israel, because ultimately, it's not about Jews living in Shiloh or in Beit El or in Jerusalem. It's about Jews living in Tel Aviv. We're colonizers, occupiers, conquistadors. And people haven't really come to terms with this idea that the Jewish nation is not just a religion, but a people as well. That's at the core of it. And what we have to do is reconstitute, revisit the very basics of not only Zionism, of Judaism. This is how it began. This is what our Bubbies and Zaydis did. And I just close with a story that, for me, allows me to draw inspiration every day. When you lose somebody close, you have to make a decision every morning anew to go on with life. My oldest son, the oldest of 8 children, was the apple of my eye. First of my children, the first one to call me dad. He was my best friend. And you learn to make a choice. You have to make a choice. Because there's this little enzyme in you that brings you down, that really takes you down. And you know, you want to be dead along with him. And I reflect more and more of the 39 years that I had with him. And he continues to teach me things all the time. It's amazing when you develop the attitude of persisting, of continuing, of forging ahead. So you allow him from his place in Gan Eden to share with you, to teach you. And this happened to me in Auschwitz. I had never gone on March of the Living. And about a month, 2 months after the Shiva, I got a call. They're taking people from the Gaza envelope on a mission to March of the Living, and they want to take 2 fathers who have lost their sons in the war. So would I be willing to go and be a representative? And Ilan Hamami, whose son Asaf Hamami was a division commander who was killed on October 7th. We didn't know each other. But we went together. And we went to, we got to Auschwitz. My background is my father is a Galicianer, and my mother is from Russia, and he's Yemenite. We were talking about how it is that for 2,000 years we didn't know each other, and here we come together. So we went to Auschwitz. The march, goes from Auschwitz to Birkenau. And at the entrance to Auschwitz is a crematorium. Most of the crematoriums are in Birkenau. We walked into the crematorium, and there was dead silence. I can't describe, only if you've been there, you know the silence inside a crematorium. It's not quiet. It's a silence of death. So we walked to the end of the room, and out of the ceiling is a rubber pipe where the Zyklon B gas emanated from. And we were standing there, and many of us were quiet, crying. Finally, someone said, Yechiel, say Kaddish. And I couldn't say Kaddish. I was tongue-tied. My throat was dry. I couldn't get a word out of my mouth. And I was saying Kaddish for my son that time because his oldest son is just going to have his bar mitzvah next month. He was too young to say. So I was saying Kaddish for my son. And then Dani is 86 years old. And he was in the death march in Auschwitz. He's a survivor. And he was a survivor in Kibbutz Be'eri. And he told me how he saved himself and his wife. He's 86 and he has the beginnings of Parkinson. So he held on to the door handle of the safety room like this for 15 hours. 15 hours like this, holding on to the door handle. so that the terrorists couldn't get in. Hamas couldn't get in. That's how he saved himself and his wife. And he comes to me with tears streaking down his cheek and says, Yechiel, please say Kaddish. I couldn't say Kaddish. And those long minutes go by of silence, and finally Ilan, the other bereaved father, came and he put an Israeli flag over my shoulders and he tied it here, my throat. He took my arm and he said, Tagid Kaddish, say Kaddish, I'll say it with you. So I don't know, I mustered the strength, cleared my mouth, and I said Kaddish haltingly, and he said it with me, and everybody answered. And then as I was marching from Auschwitz to Birkenau, I was thinking about what it was that went on in my mind for those, sometimes you have nanoseconds where flashes of ideas and pictures go through your mind, and I wanted to make sense of it. What was it that got me all stumped there? And I realized that I had a question that I needed solving. I'm saying Kaddish for my son. Is it the same Kaddish that you say in a crematorium? Is it the same Kaddish for Jews who were burned, helpless and hopeless? Is it the same Kaddish for someone who led the forces into Gaza, who spent 15 years in special operations, whose operations are still classified? I don't even know most of the stuff he did. Is it the same Kaddish? And as I was thinking about it, and I clarified in my own mind how it was that I made peace with the two Kaddishes, I remembered that when he came back once from basic training, and he went through one of the most grueling basic trainings there are in the IDF, Delta Force, the equivalent of the Delta Force. It's called Shaldag. And I said to him, he came back one Friday for Shabbat, and he was so tired. I mean, he couldn't stand up, and he had just done a hike of about 90 kilometers with 60 pounds on his back. I said, how do you do it without your knees buckling? And how do you maintain all that weight on your shoulders? And Moshe said, he always smiled. He said, Abba, I developed a patent. So what's a patent? A patent. A patent. I said, what's your patent? What do you mean a patent? He said, no, I add weight. I said, what do you mean you add weight? I said, how do you carry all that weight in your back? You tell me you add weight? He said, stop your cynicism. He says, no, Abba, I'm very serious. I add weight. What do you add, Moshe? He said, I add the hopes and prayers of my bubbies and zadis of 2,000 years. I put them on my back, and everything becomes easier. So I started to make peace with the Kaddish. And then there was one last anecdote that I remembered. At one point, he went to visit my folks in Scranton, and he brought them a picture of him coming out of a helicopter on the rope. Very dramatic-looking picture, And I had the privilege of being with my father when he was dying. And he loved the Talmud. He loved the Gemara. And he would sit in front of the Gemara all day. He was too weak to even raise his hands to turn the pages. Just sit in front. He loved the Talmud. And my mom put the picture of their grandson on the wall of him coming out of the helicopter. I noticed my dad would look up from the page of the Talmud. He'd look at his grandson. He'd smile. Then he'd come back to the text. Do it again, come back to the text and smile. At some point I said, Dad, what's going on here? You look at Moshe coming out of the helicopter, you come back to the page and smile. He said to me, you don't understand? You don't understand? My father, he said, knew this page of the Talmud and all the Talmud by heart. His father knew this page by heart. For generations, we've been learning this page of the Talmud. We all knew it by heart. But not one of them had a grandson that comes out of an IDF helicopter, an IDF uniform, an IDF rope to protect and defend the Jewish people. When I come back to the page, it's a different page. It's not the same page that my father saw. We are in a different page after October 7th. We have a Herzlian moment. It's difficult to stand alone. It's difficult to be alone. It's difficult to be ostracized. It's difficult to face this brutal, nonstop attack on the state of Israel and the Jewish people. But choose to be Herzls is what I urge you to do. Choose to recalibrate. Say, how am I going to be different? How am I going to do more for the Jewish people, for the state of Israel, for your local needs? Maintain your identity for the next generation. Be Herzl. Don't be those who saw what was happening and just turn the page. We're on a different page, and we're gonna get through this. It's a difficult time, but we've been there before, and we're gonna come out stronger, more united, and more secure. You just have to keep the faith. So thank you very much.